Fascinating, Ali, for a number of reasons. I mean, we had this morning's briefing from the Pentagon. This was the update on the politics of it all. And I suppose the questions were aimed at getting a handle of where the United States is taking this, what were the reasons behind it, and what is the timeline. I thought what I would pick out were, first of all, I mean, the headline, said that Trump was the man of action, that Iran was being crushed, 2,000 targets had been hit, and everything essentially was going swimmingly well. We got that from Hegseth this morning as well. She spoke about last June, Operation Midnight Hammer, the attack on the nuclear sites. She said that Iran was committed to rebuilding that. That was part of the problem. US negotiators offered to lift sanctions, provide nuclear fuel free of charge, but Iran, she said, refused to do that and essentially was longing it out, was delaying, dragging its feet in negotiations. She spoke about objectives, and pointedly there was no mention of regime change in any of the four. Those four objectives were to destroy Iran's navy, destroy their ballistic missile capacity, ensure proxies in the region can no longer harm Americans, and to ensure Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. As for what comes next, she said, it's a good thing for the United States to want freedom for the Iranian people, and ultimately we hope that freedom rests in their hands. That was as close as she got to saying that regime change was part of the plan and that they would back the Iranian people in an effort to change the regime. This business of how that could happen in the first place, Ali, she was asked about reports that Kurdish forces, there was a consideration that America would arm them in the hope of inspiring a popular uprising. She batted that away, said that was false and should not be reported. The focus, she said, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, is on ensuring the quick and effective success of Operation Epic Fury. So that phrase, quick and effective, does that shed light perhaps on the timeline as the Americans see it right now? She was asked about what would determine victory. What is victory in all of this? She said that would be determined by the commander-in-chief once the goals and the objectives we have repeatedly laid out are fully realised, a reference to those four aims. Interestingly, she was asked, well, if you achieve these objectives and the Islamic Republic is still in place, is that an acceptable outcome? That was the right question to ask her. She said that was a hypothetical. She didn't want to engage in that. There was the business of different American officials saying different things, Ali, this business of an imminent threat. She said that there was no discord between officials, that there was one plan and that they've been consistent. Many would argue they have not. But she said the strike, the military action, was prompted by the president's feeling that Iran was going to strike the United States and our assets in the region. And he wasn't going to sit back and watch that happen. So, rewind to Marco Rubio on Capitol Hill. He said it was essentially America getting our retaliation in first because we knew Israel was going to strike. That's what Rubio said then. This is what Levitt is saying now. Make up your own mind whether or not there is a consistency between both those things. Ground troops, she said, are not part of the current plan, although she's not ruling that out. She was asked about the munitions strike on the girls' school in Iran, 175 fatalities in that. Was it US munitions that hit that school? She said, not that we know of, but she said the US doesn't target civilians. In terms of the timeline, she was asked about that, the timeline, for America launching this military action. She said the president had a good feeling that Iran was going to strike assets. She said that obviously had an impact on the timeline of the operation, but not quite the president's decision in its entirety. She didn't go any further than that, but I suppose the question that's raised there if it wasn't his decision alone, who else was involved and to what extent did they have influence? There is this discussion, of course, that America was bounced into this action by Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu's eagerness to strike. She spoke about Spain, said that Spain actually, after yesterday's harsh words from the president for the Spanish stance, she said Spain has agreed to cooperate now with the US military. Didn't flesh out any detail on that. She spoke about oil prices. She was asked about that. Said there was no definitive plan as to when US Navy escorts would sail alongside tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. But let's have a listen to the business of Spain and when she touched on that particular matter, Ali.
The president expects all of our European allies, of course, to cooperate in this long sought-after mission, not just for the United States, but also for Europe, to crush the rogue Iranian regime that, again, not only threatens America, but also threatens our European allies as well.
James Matthews, thank you so much for us there in Washington. Well, today was an example of the contrasting military power of the US and the UK. Earlier, as James mentioned there, US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth told reporters of the extensive success being achieved by the US in its conflict with Iran. Have a listen. That included the sinking of an Iranian naval ship off the coast of Sri Lanka by a US submarine, some 2,000 miles across the Arabian Sea from Iran. And he said they've hunted down and killed the leader of a unit that tried to assassinate Donald Trump.
Yesterday, in the Indian Ocean, and we'll play it on the screen there, an American submarine sunk an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II. Like in that war, back when we were still the War Department, we are fighting to win. Also, yesterday, the leader of the unit who attempted to assassinate President Trump has been hunted down and killed. Iran tried to kill President Trump, and President Trump got the last laugh.
Well, here, the government is under attack from multiple directions from the US president for its refusal to allow UK bases to be used in those initial attacks, and from the opposition for the slowness in deploying military resources to the region to protect British assets. Well, there's a lot going on today, and here to discuss some of it with me is our political correspondent, Rob Powell. Thank you. You were watching Prime Minister's Questions. One of the big accusations being put to the Prime Minister is about the speed at which things like HMS Dragon, this big vessel, are moving and the speed at which action is happening.
Yeah, I think it's tension over whether the government is really moving fast enough and doing all it can to protect UK interests, UK citizens and UK military bases in the Gulf and in the wider region as well. We, of course, learned in the last 24 hours that HMS Dragon, a Type 45 destroyer, will be heading to Cyprus. The issue is, right now, it's still in a berth in Portsmouth, having ammunition loaded onto it. It's not going to leave until next week. Even then, it will take another, 6 or so days to get there. So you're talking 10 days from now before it's even in Cyprus. French and Greek ships will be there sooner. And I think that's why the question is being asked, will it get there too late? Why wasn't it deployed to the region earlier, when we were seeing this big military build-up of US gear going to the region? The answer you get from Western officials is basically the competing global priorities that they're having to deal with. They talk about a carrier strike group going up to the high north to deter the Russians later this year. I think the more critical take, which certainly has something to it, is about the level of defence investment that we've had in the country in recent years, the state that the military is in, and whether this is what happens when you don't plug enough money into the military that you're left wanting when something like this comes along. I think the other point of tension is about whether the government's getting the diplomacy of all this right. We obviously saw frustration from Donald Trump that the UK didn't allow those UK bases to be used for US strikes on Iran sooner. That was then reversed by Keir Starmer, who allowed the US to do it. They haven't done any yet. They haven't flown any missions from those bases yet, but warplanes are expected there in the coming days. The question that the opposition is asking is, couldn't they have reached that judgment about allowing the US to use those bases sooner And also, they raise the question about why the UK isn't getting more directly involved in some of this action as well. If the reason for allowing the US to use these bases is to protect British citizens and interests in the region, well, why are we outsourcing it to the Americans, is what the Conservatives essentially say. So I think the risk for the Prime Minister is, look, he has, I think, valid, argued over, but valid reasons for being deeply critical about the overall aims of this mission. But at the same time, it was perhaps always inevitable that we'd get dragged in some capacity. Given that, could we have been more proactive to try and protect our interests out there, but also potentially to protect some diplomatic relationships as well?
Yeah, a lot to navigate. Thank you, Rob Powell, very much for that update. Well, meanwhile, the first government charter flight to rescue stranded Britons from the Middle East is taking off this evening from Oman. 2 further flights will take off from the country in the coming days. British Airways announced it will operate 2 more flights between the capital Muscat and London Heathrow on Friday and Saturday, in addition to a commercial flight tonight. The scale of the disruption to aviation has been likened to the turmoil over the volcanic ash cloud in 2010.
I can confirm, Mr. Speaker, that the first charter flight is expected to leave Oman later today, and 2 more will come in the coming days. The country really does want to know this. I'm sorry. Family and friends are worried sick about people who are caught out. I will not be put on. I can announce, Mr. Speaker, we will lay on additional charter flights in coming days. British Airways are now laying on an extra flight from Oman, and the Foreign Secretary will have further discussions today.
Well, that was Prime Minister at lunchtime, and I got more on the conflict and the government's response with the Minister for the Armed Forces, Al Khans. Can I just get some confirmation on HMS Dragon, this warship that's heading to Cyprus, is leaving Portsmouth next week? When do we think it will get to Cyprus?
Yeah, so I'm not going to talk about specific details. What I will say is that that vessel was being fitted out for a different task. We've now completely re-rolled it. We're going through varieties, different bits of maintenance to make sure that as fast as possible we can get that system up and running. We've had to change weapon systems on it, finish welding, get it up and running, and get it sailing as fast as possible.
You talk about being as fast as possible, and I understand that, you can't get into exact details, but I think people want to know that there is a degree of urgency given the situation and given that this base in Cyprus was targeted days ago. It could be weeks, by the sound of it, before it gets to Cyprus.
Yeah, so I've never been criticised for a lack of urgency in my life previously. What I would say is that that asset is specifically designed to protect the carrier strike group and work within the carrier strike group, which was planning to go elsewhere. And so to deploy that point defence asset to Cyprus is not the only way in which we can defend our regional allies in the Mediterranean. And we've seen just recently some of the amazing work from our F-35 pilots, our Typhoon pilots, our counter-UAS teams that are downing drones all over the place, ranging from Qatar all the way, into sort of the broader sort of west of the Middle East. And so it's really, really impressive what we're doing so far in a defensive sort of linebacker role. And my hat's off to the armed forces that taking it to the enemy.
Can I ask you a bit about our missile stockpiles? Do we have enough to last the 4 to 5 weeks that Donald Trump talks about this war lasting? And of course, it could be longer.
So we've just done a resupply of some of our systems into the Middle East. I'm not going to talk about hypotheticals. Unfortunately, the only people that helps if we do talk about either stockpiles, timings, details in the middle of a very dangerous, fast-moving situation just aids our adversaries. So I'm going to err away from that. What I do have is complete confidence in the planning capacity and capability of the military to ensure we're properly prepared for any eventuality. And this is a prime example. We saw tensions heating up in the Middle East, and we pre-positioned F-35s and Typhoons and multiple lots of military personnel to ensure we were in a position to protect our regional allies and assets. What unfolded, last Friday, the US was in negotiations. And then by Monday, they had struck 10 different countries with hundreds of ballistic missiles and hundreds of drones.
Happy that we're relying on French support to support British assets?
There's only one worse thing than working with allies, and that's working without them. And remember that while we're also going through the planning prior to this conflict, or this crisis breaking out, we've seen a 30% increase in Russian assets, both subsurface and surface in the high north. And so we've got a multitude of different issues facing both the UK and our Western allies, and we work collaboratively and collectively to ensure we cover them all off. And I think that's completely appropriate.
Can I ask you what your view is on the status of the so-called special relationship between Britain and the US?
Yeah, so I've worked with the US military almost on many of the operations in the past, shoulder to shoulder, whether that be in firefights through to planning and headquarters. And we have a lot of commonality and interoperability with the US.
I understand that, but I'm talking specifically about what we've heard from Donald Trump.
Well, if you let me get there, but what I also say is that we also disagree sometimes on intelligence sharing and the legal perception on operations. What Donald Trump says is down to Donald Trump. What I'm telling you is that we're playing an important role in this operation. It's very effective, and it's been proven by the amount of drones that we've shot down, and indeed the much broader C2 and integration of air defence across the Middle East that we're absolutely supporting with.
But do you think that words matter? You say what Donald Trump says is down to Donald Trump. It obviously matters what the president of the US is saying. You know, people have described this as Keir Starmer's Love Actually moment, standing up to the US president. Is that how you see it?
We've got to be really honest with ourselves. If we're going to get involved in a military operation, we need a really sound legal basis. We need to rebuild trust about how we use our forces, where, when and why, from 2003. And then secondly, we need to have a really
It sounds like you're saying the
effective
basis for Trump intervening was not a sound legal basis.
We have to have a really, I'm not going to comment on the US's legal perspective, I'm telling you on ours, is we need to have a really clear plan and thought through, carefully calculated plan to the end state. Because to get involved in something without a clear end state or objective that would be, every military staff college I've been in, would be to repeat the mistakes of the past. And then the other piece would be we must be in lockstep with our...
Do you think Donald Trump has a clear
with
plan?
Our allies and partners. And we and the French and the Germans are all in lockstep. Reference the US plan. It's not in any way, shape or form my job to talk about hypotheticals or another nation's plan on how they engage with their operational output, especially to do it on
But isn't it
open source
important, you know, whether we like it or not, we are now in some way involved in this, and isn't it important to know what the end game is?
I'm sorry, but I need to finish the sentence, then I'm more than happy to ask the question. But what I was saying, and in the midst of a fast-paced, moving, dangerous situation. Now, when you talk about whether we are involved or not, yes, we are absolutely involved. I will not shed a tear for the Iranian regime that has been the keystone to instability for the last 20 to 30 years. We're in a defensive posture ranging from Qatar all the way across to the Eastern Mediterranean, providing critical support, whether that be mapping and tracking targets to neutralising them should we have the capabilities to do so. On top of that, we are and have deployed capabilities to the Middle East to reinforce our position, whether that's Wildcat helicopters moving into Cyprus or whether that's preparing more assets to deploy to the south. What I would say is we've got to balance that against some of the other national interests that we have at the moment, which is a major war in eastern Ukraine that is causing 1,000 casualties a day and a 30% uptake in Russian surface and subsurface capability in the high north.
So are we overstretched,
our military planners
do you think?
are all over that. Not overstretched. The fact is the situation has changed. And we now have a multifaceted problem, whether that's in Eastern Europe down to the Mediterranean. And I don't need to explain that to people. People can see it. And the reality is I've never lived in a period of time in the last 24 years where we see such a geostrategically dangerous or fractious time.
The US have said that they're prepared to give naval escorts in the Strait of Hormuz. Is the UK prepared to use its resources to that extent as well?
So what I would say, this is a prime example of where conflicts overseas have a direct impact into broader international economies. And I think it's really important to recognise for the British population that these conflicts, whether we like it or not, whether it be fossil fuels, whether it be gas, whether it be national markets, have a specific impact here, much the same as the Ukraine did, pushing up food inflation by 40% at the start of the conflict and affecting world oil prices. And so we've just got to recognise that defence is a critical component of ensuring economic stability, both nationally and indeed internationally.
Let's bring in our panel for this evening. Bren Judah, former advisor to David Lammy as Foreign Secretary, and former Security Minister Baroness Pauline Neville-Jones. Thank you both for joining us on another big day. Baroness Neville-Jones, how do you think diplomacy has changed since you were Security Minister? I think when David Cameron was Prime Minister, things have changed a lot since then.
Well, certainly the relations generally, I think, around the world have become more complicated. And you've seen reasons in the military field why that should be the case, but also the political. And now the advent of Trump does make a difference to how any relationship actually between America and other parts of the world functions, and not excluded. I mean, we have been accustomed to being very close on an operational level. I mean, that has been the key to it, whether it has been in the political, diplomatic, or military or intelligence fields. And some of that is still true. I mean, I don't have reason to suppose, that the intelligence relationship, though there will be discussions they'll have to have on, how this affects policy, but that is not functioning. And a lot of the ordinary business will go on. But what the top says, of course, does matter. And the Americans are at the moment pursuing a policy which we're not equipped to join. We're not in the business of being able, given our defence position at the moment, actually to join him. Yet we weren't asked to do that. We were asked to do something slightly different, which was to enable our assets to be used by the United States. I have to say that my own position is that I don't entirely agree with what the Prime Minister did. But I don't fundamentally think, we're in a position where we ought to start making moves of a kind which open up a great big transatlantic rumpus.
Yeah. And we'll talk some more about the so-called special relationship later on the show. But Ben, did you expect something like this to happen? I know you can't predict, but when you were with David Lammy recently in the Foreign Office?
So throughout 2024, it was clear to British diplomacy that a great war in the Middle East, in a sense, had already broken out. Instead of being just a big war between Israel and Gaza, there was really a multi-front war between Iran's proxies and Israel, playing out in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, with the United States getting drawn into those fronts progressively. And there was, from April 2023, there had begun to be, from April 2024, there had started to be sort of contingency plans developed around what would happen if there was a Israeli attack on Iran.
Even so, do you think we were prepared?
Well, I think we were following the scene, and I think our understanding, knowledge of what was going on was pretty good. Were we equipped actually to in any way participate? The answer, I think, is no. And I didn't see any sign, actually, that the government, was intended to do that. And I think that's the correct position for us to be in. We're not in a position, actually, to do anything other than a fairly narrow defence of our own interests, which is now what the government is now doing.
Yeah. Do you think we have the defence capability? Do you agree with that?
Well, I think the most important thing to kind of be clear about to the viewers right now is we have an America problem. Our closest ally traditionally that we have built our entire security around has become deeply erratic, unreliable and unpredictable. And that is a big problem for our diplomacy and our place in the world. But we also have a Europe problem. Right now, there isn't a clearly defined European position on this conflict that we could tuck into. You have Spain heading into opposition against the war. You have Germany seemingly heading into some kind of support of the war. And I think that there is a role that the UK can play working with France, who's taken a position quite similar to ours, to try and bring Europe together to have a clearer voice and not just be bystanders diplomatically and in terms of defending our allies in the region in this conflict.
Is there still a rules-based world order? You know, when you were security minister, that's
I think rules are... No, I think not, actually. I think we are... Whether that's on the way out or whether there's a break in the system, don't know. But
do you think it was an illegal war?
Difficult. That's a really complex question. It's not a simple question. Deeply wicked, evil regime. Does one stand by and go on saying the only way in which we can deal with these people is diplomatically? To my way of thinking, that doesn't entirely make sense. So, do you launch what has happened? That's a separate question, it seems to me. But I don't think they were invulnerable, actually, to being taken on militarily. I don't think that. What I would say about what was just said is, however, there's a role for keeping the transatlantic relationship going and not getting a European gang-up with the United States the other side and us throwing brickbats at each other. This is a very important moment, actually, to try and keep that relationship going. And I think that's exactly what the German Chancellor was doing in Washington the other day.
And he was there yesterday. Thank you both. We will come back to you very shortly. The conflict in the Middle East is sure to feature heavily on our late night programme, The Wrap, tonight from 10 p.m. Here to discuss all of today's big stories and the best of tomorrow's papers will be the former Downing Street Director of Communications, James Lyons, and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Salma Shah. Well, the Prime Minister faced MPs for PMQs earlier today, still reeling, no doubt, from that broadside from Donald Trump. Did he channel his inner Churchill or was it more Hugh Grant? Well, our political editor, Beth Rigby, was watching and has her analysis.
Keir Starmer's having his Love Actually moment.
American planes are operating out of British bases. That is the special relationship in action. Hanging on to President Trump's latest words is not the special relationship in action.
And you'll probably know this cult classic. It's when Hugh Grant stands up to a bullying US president played by Billy Bob Thornton. And now Keir Starmer's living it after President Trump attacked the Prime Minister for not allowing the US to use UK bases to launch offensive strikes against Iran.
By the way, I'm not happy with the UK either.
Trump really went in. It's all over the front pages as he attacked Starmer for ruining the special relationship and said of the Prime Minister, he's no Winston Churchill.
This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
But Starmer is showing some mettle. He's refusing to let President Trump use UK bases for these offensive strikes. Instead, the Prime Minister is allowing the US to use UK bases for limited and specific activity. And what that basically means is taking out Iran's missile and drone capabilities to try to stop Tehran launching attacks.
What I was not prepared to do on Saturday was for the UK to join a war unless I was satisfied there was a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. That remains my position.
Now, people often say that they don't know what Keir Starmer stands for, but on this, he is being really firm and clear-eyed. He is adamant that the UK should stick to international law instead of giving way to the law of the jungle. What is his position? Well, his position is that he's going to defend UK interests and defend UK allies. And to that end, he's deploying a warship to the Mediterranean, he's deploying Wildcat helicopters, and he's flying defensive missions to help allies like Qatar. Now, for Kemi Badenoch, well, she thinks that the Prime Minister is being pathetic and weak, and at Prime Minister's questions, she wanted to know why the UK wasn't flying defensive missions into Iran.
He is catching arrows rather than stopping the archer. That's what we're talking about. Why is he asking our allies to do what we should be doing ourselves?
For his part, the Prime Minister's clear that he doesn't want any escalation of this war, and he will leave any bombing of Iran to the US. And just as he's standing up to Trump, well, he had some sharp words for Kemi Badenoch too.
Moments like this define a leader of the opposition. They can either step up, act in the national interest and show that they're fit to be Prime Minister, or they can expose their utter irrelevance. She has chosen the second.
Now, I think it's fair to say that Keir Starmer is no Hugh Grant, but he will be hoping that this tussle with Trump will play well with the British public and particularly with his Labour base. But this is much bigger than politics. This is a historic moment in which a leader has to decide whether or not to join the US in a war. And I think Keir Starmer will be hoping that history will look favourably on his particular choice.
Well, our panel, Ben and Pauline, are still with us. Ben, you've got first-hand experience of what it's like being behind the scenes, dealing with the Trump administration. Can you tell us a bit about your experience of that?
There's so much uncertainty in the world right now because there's so much uncertainty in the White House. I was once at a set-piece meeting at NATO, foreign ministers around the table, advisors like myself, well tucked into the back, and I saw Marco Rubio literally run out of the room to take a call from President Trump and come back in with a completely different policy.
I mean, yeah, it just shows, you know, we've got this character that is overshadowing everything. That's not...
No, it doesn't make...
It does happen in history, but it's
doesn't
not
make making policy easy.
Yeah.
But I do think, you know, we have some absolutely fundamental interests in keeping this show going,
what do you think
not disrupting it.
Do you think Keir Starmer, who seems to be deliberately, to an extent, standing up to Donald Trump now, do you think that's the right approach?
No. No,
Why?
I don't think standing up to the president publicly and appearing, you know, to take a quite different view of both the objectives and what he's actually doing is clever policy.
Even if you think the war wasn't
you have to have frank
legitimate.
talking in private, and that certainly should be the case. My own belief is that actually the second decision that the Prime Minister took, which was that we are going to defend British interests, and that does involve letting the Americans use our bases, could perfectly legitimately have been his first decision. It was very clear, if you have an outbreak of war in the Middle East, that Britain has big interests there. We're not capable of defending them on our own and by ourselves. And indeed, I think it was a correct decision to look after British interests, but we needn't have done it in a fashion which actually appeared to say, but that excludes our ability to help you.
Ben,
so, see,
yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of mistake, too, that you are arguing in the long, not very important, but it roughs up the relationship in a way which diplomatically and politically, and particularly in public, you should avoid doing.
What's your response to that, Ben?
Look, if I ever serve in government again, I will ban the phrase the special relationship. It's weak, it's needy, it sets the wrong expectations. We don't follow America everywhere. We never have. Harold Wilson said no to joining the war in Vietnam under intense pressure from the United States. Nobody until this week even remembered that. And that shows that the real special relationship's between people. And that always leads us to be close in the end.
So yes, I was in the embassy when Mr. Wilson did that. And it did cause, actually, quite a lot of disruption for a period. Because it was, the public manner in which it was done. Now, you can't avoid it having public consequences.
Did you agree with that at the time?
But it was the style of thing. What?
At the time, did you agree with that approach?
No.
So you would have rather the British troops had sent to the jungles of Southeast Asia?
No.
He was asking for the black watch.
We're not arguing about the decision. We're arguing about how you convey these decisions. That's what I'm... And I think this is true of what the Prime Minister's just done.
So do you agree with the Prime Minister's approach at the moment?
I don't agree. I'm fascinated to know more about serving in the embassy during the Vietnam War.
We'll talk about this after the programme.
I think it's weak not to express your opinion publicly to the British people, and I think that what Donald Trump is doing is not foreign policy, it's foreign politics.
Do you think it's driven by domestic politics to an extent?
Well, he sees himself as the leader of the global right, and for the last few weeks he's been attacking the Prime Minister with slogans and
sorry,
policies.
I'm talking about Starmer, but...
Oh, so,
in the US as well.
President Trump sees himself as the leader of the global right, and for the last few weeks he's been attacking the Prime Minister with slogans and on campaigning issues that the right here has been pushing him towards. He's broken the old foreign policy convention of national unity and Western unity and staying out of internal affairs. I believe there's been some running commentary about British Muslims this morning, wind farms. This is not normal.
Entirely.
This is not foreign policy, it's foreign politics.
Don't disagree. Absolutely don't disagree. But you've got to decide, as a country that does have a lot of dependency on the United States, just how far you then start to divide the road and go down a different path and state very publicly that that's what you're doing. In an instance, it seems to me, where he need not have done it. It doesn't seem to me that actually, if you're going to do that, you choose a ground which has real weight and where there are real interests involved. On the contrary, I think he took a decision, actually, which was harmful to our interests and had to reverse it. That doesn't make a great deal of sense as a point on which to stand up, quotes unquote, to the president.
OK, thank you both. We will come back to you. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. As the war sends wholesale oil and gas prices spiralling and threatens to push up energy bills here, the Chancellor meets with industry bosses to discuss the uncertainty ahead.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. What you see a lot of here are military machines, soldiers, devastation and destruction. What you see very little of are the locals, the Gazans, the people who used to live here, the ghosts of this town. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls, and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered. You have the black flag, you have the yellow flag. People were kidnapped.
Inside this convoy, prisoners released by Israel in exchange for their hostages. The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. There were tears and there was defiance. This land has been farmed for hundreds of years, but now it's a scene of conflict. Israeli settlers have come to this area to seize land.
They've taken the land that I inherited from my father, and my father inherited from his father.
What would happen if you enter?
Oh, we'll be shot.
This is a place where the past is cherished, but the future is feared. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Sky News, get the full story first.
Well, hello and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
Now, the war in Iran has led to renewed concerns about energy prices as production is disrupted across the Middle East. This afternoon, Qatar Energy declared what's called force majeure, meaning that it would not honour all contracts. Earlier, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves met oil and gas companies, promising to work with the industry to look at ways to protect households from the impact of rising energy costs. One analyst today predicted a 10% rise in the energy price cap. Meanwhile, data shared exclusively with Sky News by Uswitch shows that energy firms have pulled more than half of their fixed deals from the market in the wake of the Iran conflict. Let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig. So the Chancellor wants to look like she is doing something. What is she doing?
Well, the meeting all sounded a bit cosy because, according to the Treasury, she was clear that she wants the energy profits levy to come to an end. Didn't say when. I think when it was brought in by Rishi Sunak, one of his last acts as Chancellor before he quit Boris Johnson's government, 2022. She's made that promise. She stands by it. The Treasury does say the crisis in the Middle East has had real-time consequences on oil and gas prices. It's right we respond to this. So perhaps she's thinking again about the energy profits levy. It's essentially a windfall tax. And some critics will say, well, hold on, why are you getting rid of this just to help the oil companies? I mean, critics will say, for example, the boss of BP until December, a Canadian called Murray Auchincloss, was paid £5.4 million, and that was down from £8 million the year before. And at the same time, one thing she did not say to these oil companies, 11 of them she had, I've talked about ripping off consumers at the pumps. Now, a man called Howard Cox, you may have heard of, he's the founder of Fair Fuel UK. He's claiming that pump prices have gone up in the last 48 hours by an average of 6.7p for petrol, 8.8 for diesel. And he calls it opportunistic profiteering, he says is rife again. Now, Kemi Badenoch raised this issue at Prime Minister's Questions in amongst all the other things she talked about, when perhaps she might have mentioned what Trump said about Winston Churchill. She said Kemi Badenoch said the war is interrupting the supply of oil and gas that's driving up the cost of petrol, making it more expensive to heat our homes. And then she said, this is stopping drilling in the North Sea while importing the same oil and gas from Norway. Didn't we hear that from President Trump last night? Exactly the same point about UK energy policy, stopping drilling, and the President was talking about buying energy from Norway that they're extracting from the North Sea. So I think they're going to hear a lot more about this issue. The Chancellor, if she's not careful, is going to be accused of being soft and weak on these oil companies. And especially if there is more evidence of profiteering by the petrol companies. The claim being made by Howard Cox is that they're still selling the old petrol that they had in their tanks, but they're putting up the prices before they've even had to pay more for the fuel.
John, thank you very much.
And I speak as someone who paid £1.37 for a litre in London this morning.
Well, I think this is the part of this story. People might not be following the ins and outs of what's going on in the Middle East, but they are certainly going to care about all of this. So thank you very much, John Craig. Let's stay with the economy, shall we? Donald Trump's offer of US-backed insurance and naval escorts has failed to get ships moving through the Strait of Hormuz. While there is a genuine security risk to vessels, the failure to get ships crossing is in the most part actually down to their insurance being reassessed. Paul Kelso, our business and economics correspondent, has been to Lloyd's of London, the world's oldest insurance market.
This is Lloyd's of London, the heart of global maritime insurance, as it has been since 1689, when the first brokerage was established in a coffee shop close to this site. This is the original rostrum, where a caller would shout information to brokers, and that is the Lutein Bell. It comes from a ship called the Lutein that sank, carrying a cargo of gold bullion. Lloyd's paid out for the loss and established its reputation. What's worrying brokers here today isn't gold, it's oil and gas, specifically the oil and gas on tankers in the Persian Gulf, currently sat waiting to know what to do either side of the Straits of Hormuz. They've been sitting there since the Iranian military made threats, but there's another factor, not just their security, their insurance status. The Lloyd's market has something called a Joint War Committee, which assesses what it calls war-related perils for shipping, and they have expanded the area of what they consider to be high risk in the last few days to include Kuwait, Qatar, a wider area of the Gulf. And that simply means the insurance those ships set out with may no longer apply. So they insist they are insured, but they're having to reassess the risk. Reinsurance will come in due course, and then owners can decide whether to move their ships. For now, they are static, and traffic through the Straits of Hormuz has collapsed. What's going up is the cost, not just of shipping, but almost certainly the cost of insuring these vessels. Premiums will rise. There is an offer from Donald Trump made via social media that an American financial institution will offer insurance, but here they don't know what that means.
The detail of such a scheme hasn't been given to anyone so far as we know, and it will take time to work it out. And the appetite is unknown. Essentially, our market still writing risks, and there isn't a perception here that there's a need for intervention at this time.
Trump has also promised naval vessels to provide an escort for tankers, even if that could mean oil bound for China being taken there by US military vessels. Some think that might reduce the risk. Others point out it could push up the premium because a naval vessel with a US flag could be a target.
There will be those who think it might increase the target because the Iranians are targeting US military. It's not known how capable they would be against the new drone and missile threats that we're seeing. This is not the same as the 80s. So yes, obviously people would like to see the detail, they'd like to see it happen. If you're a tanker owner, you'd be, on the one hand, delighted that it's been offered, on the other hand, trying to understand whether it does increase the risk or not.
This place once paid out £1 million to the owners of the Titanic within 30 days. Now, mercifully, no vessels have been lost since this war began. We can be pretty certain that prices of oil, of gas, of premiums paid by those shipping them, and ultimately to consumers, they're going up.
Well, as you can see, Ben and Pauline are still here. This obviously is a national security, but also cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
Pauline.
Well, I mean, what we haven't mentioned, but is also in this game, is also gas. And the Qataris are producing great quantities of the gas that the world consumes, and that includes the UK. So it isn't just, I think, oil. Fortunately, summer's coming, which means domestic consumption will go down. So I think the hit on households may be less, but undoubtedly it lifts the whole cost of living in the economy as a whole because of we have to use energy for production.
And any hit is going to be a lot for households.
Yes, I mean, it potentially punctures a hole in the Chancellor's forecasts. Well, I think she was hoping things would smooth out and growth would begin. Yeah. And I think it does hit the growth, potentially hit the growth target.
Yeah.
Which is I mean, I may be an opposition party, but I want to see this economy grow, and I am concerned.
Yeah, it's really tricky for Rachel Reeves.
And the other thing, of course, is this what Trump is saying about offering escorts. I'm very sceptical that even the US has the resources for that. And are they really going to? Well. I think there are hundreds of ships that will want to go through. In addition to which, the Houthis, I mean the Iranians, but also the Houthis can mine. It isn't just what they can put up in the air; it's also what they can put down in the water. So they're going to have the minesweepers in and escorts, and they're going to be firing while all this happens. It doesn't make sense. I don't actually think that can happen. So I think the ships are bottled up.
That's interesting. Ben, on the domestic issues, I mean, this is really difficult for Rachel Reeves, isn't it?
Ukraine war, big gas shock. Iran war, big gas shock. Hydrocarbons are fundamentally vulnerable to geopolitics, and that's one of the reasons that this government is making a generational investment in clean power and renewables in the UK. It's not just doing it because of net zero, it's not just doing it because it's green, it's doing it because of cold, hard realism. Security, when you've got solar panels and windmills in Britain, you're not vulnerable to these kind of shocks from whatever Putin is doing or whatever Netanyahu is doing.
Do you think...
Well, I don't disagree with that, but actually, the point that's often made about we still should be using the North Sea resources is the case, and that's not a new point being made by Kemi Badenoch. It's a
point being made by Donald Trump.
Position that we should still be doing that, and it's foolish not to allow ourselves to make use of our resources while we have them and when they're necessary.
Is that fair, Ben?
I think the most important thing that the government can do in energy right now is that enormous investment into renewables. British energy policy has been disastrous for decades, and one of the things we really need to grip are these technologies of the future.
Yeah,
you see the Chinese making an historic, unprecedented investment in windmills and in solar panels. They're not doing it because they're soft-headed. They're doing it because they're hard-headed.
Well, all I would say is that I think that the future is the future.
Sorry. Thank you both, Pauline and Ben. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Trevor Phillips will be here to tell us all about a special programme, this time tomorrow, featuring an exclusive extended interview with the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbours, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbours that harbour decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Now, tomorrow there's going to be a special edition of the Politics Hub here at 7 o'clock on Sky News, featuring an extended interview by Trevor Phillips, who you can see joins me now, with the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. She is set to deliver what's been billed as a significant speech on migration. And today we heard that the government was announcing a crackdown on visas. So, Trevor,
hi, Ali.
very exciting.
I'm so sorry
tell us a little
to elbow you out of the seat.
No, anything. I would definitely be elbowed out for you. So tell us about, this is a really long interview, isn't it?
Well, it's unusual these days. As you know, most politicians, they want to be in, out, they want to say their lines and get lost and make sure that they don't say anything that will get them into trouble. This is unusual because it's the top-line politician who says, OK, I'm going to sit for 45 minutes, 50 minutes.
45 minutes.
Yeah, and you can ask me anything and I'll deal with it. And it says something about her confidence in herself, that she's ready. I mean, you know, I'm a pussycat, so she's chosen the easiest possible interviewer, but nonetheless, 45 minutes is a long time in which you can make mistakes.
And what are you hoping to get out of her?
Well, what's interesting is that she's already marked everybody's card this week. Last Friday, people were saying that the reason Labour had trouble with the by-election was because Shabana Mahmood has been tough on immigration and that this has alienated people who then went and voted for the Greens. What she's been saying the last few days is, if you think you've seen tough, you have not heard me yet. And what she's going to say in a speech tomorrow, she promises, is going to be more Shabana Mahmood. And I suspect when she sits down to talk with me, she will be explaining, which is a thing that's unusual in modern politics, why she's doing the thing that you do least expect her to. She's the daughter of immigrants. She's a Muslim. But she, I think, is being tougher on the issue of immigration than anybody in the political scene right now. And that makes her really interesting.
And she's getting a lot of pushback in her own party. But we are expecting migration to come down. Is migration going to continue to be such a salient issue?
It's going to fall, but she's not so concerned about the numbers. What she says is that this is about fairness. And her argument is that the Labour Party hasn't been treating everybody fairly. It's been allowing people to cheat the system, and what she's going to do is to be very tough. But in a way, you have to see this, you're right, against the background of politics in general. She's a leadership contender.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
And what she's doing is she's announcing, this is who I am, this is the strain of Labour I'm supporting. She's the voice of what's called Blue Labour, which is a sort of traditional, grounded, old-school Labour, working-class Labour. And I think she will be making her pitch to say, I'm in charge, I'm the leader of this, and this is where Labour ought to turn. It oughtn't to be going more left-wing, less Zach Polanski, more Ernest Bevin.
Yeah, she might struggle to persuade her party. But are we going to get a little bit into Shabana the woman?
Yes, I think that's one of the reasons that we wanted to do this longer interview, because you don't hear enough these days about what motivates people in politics. And you know, you have this experience every night. Yeah. They will come in and you can sort of hear them repeating the lines, and you don't get quite enough of, why am I saying this? Now, the thing with Shabana Mahmood, and I've done, you know, interviews with her before, is that you do get the sense that this is a person who has never been told what to say by anybody. She says what she says because she believes it, and the argument I think she's making tomorrow is aimed as much at her own party as it is at the public.
OK, Trevor Phillips, thank you so much. Well, do tune in to that tomorrow. That sounds absolutely fascinating. A 45-minute-long interview with the Home Secretary and potential leadership candidate Shabana Mahmood. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee, where I'm sure we will have all the latest coverage on the war in Iran.